Hey, everybody, welcome back. Tom and Mike show. Tom, we still got to figure out what we're going to name this thing because I got a couple comments in the YouTube section saying we got to come up with a name. Maybe we put something out there like a contest.
We'll crowdsource the name. I think that's a good idea. Although I appreciate that you called it the Tom and Mike Show. So that was very Jeffersonian of you. So good job.
Well, I try. So, some big news in the fire service today. You guys been paying any attention to this ESS fire in Chandler outside Phoenix?
I heard a little bit about it, but
Yeah.
I don't know that I know the latest and greatest.
I think this is like one of the craziest things for us, right? So obviously the Phoenix area, a lot of experience out of Surprise with these energy storage system fires, and they haven't gone inside. It's an older system that doesn't meet the codes of today. They got robots opening the door to go inside and check, but the sprinkler system's been running since like for 4 days. It's just something I don't think any of us are ever used to in the fire business, right?
Wow.
That is pretty nuts.
So, well, hey, that's a little hot news, but today we've got Richard Price with us, who most of you all know as the guy as it relates to PulsePoint. And some of you are probably scratching your head going, what's PulsePoint? Don't worry, we're going to talk about that because it's something your organization, your community needs to have. It is an incredible feature, and I'll never forget Atlanta FRI were there in a high rise, and like the whole room lights up that there's a CPR on the other high rise. And most of us were trying to do math if we can get down 20 floors and over and back up again. But if you've never had your phone alert when you're in a PulsePoint community, it's a noise you've never heard it make, right, Tom?
It's a game changer for sure, and I remember it. I remember learning about it when it first was coming out of California, and we just the scariest times for me as fire chief are when we do CAD upgrades. We had a CAD upgrade the last couple of weeks, and it broke PulsePoint for about 5 days, and I haven't had it for 3 or 4 years, but my ass was on the chopping block there for a few days where the community doesn't have PulsePoint available to them. Not for the cardiac arrest part. That's a big part of PulsePoint. I would not want to distract from it, but it's the community awareness. People hear sirens and they go, we want to know what's going on. And how else do you find the public interacting, with you like that? It's so popular with people who have no connection to the business otherwise. So yeah, it's a thing. I was in Atlanta. I remember that event. I remember my phone going off for that. That's a good one, Mike.
All right, I appreciate you guys, all those kind words.
So Richard, how did you ever come up with this idea to let's crowdsource an app? And I mean, there's been, I think, 100 unintended consequences, but what a cool app. Where did you and the team come up with this idea?
I mean, I was a fire chief at the time, and we were doing all the things that, good fire chiefs were doing around cardiac arrest survival. We were training our citizens in CPR, and we were placing AEDs in the community. We had, our own dispatch center, and, we were, a pro QA agency. We were giving pre-arrival instructions. We were giving CPR instructions. We were an ALS transport agency. Our crews were using, pit crew CPR. We were choreographing our actions on scene. We were doing everything that we could to make a difference in these rare events that time is of the essence, and that you have such a short window of opportunity to make a difference in. And I was out to lunch one day and had an event happened nearby me. I heard the crew traveling to the scene, and I wasn't paying attention to every medical call that was going on in the district. They would have paged me if that was something I needed to be at. And that entire time I heard that siren get closer and louder and ultimately pull into the parking lot where I was located. And, that's when I learned that somebody right next door, was unconscious, unresponsive, where I likely could have made a big difference. And, for someone who had been working so hard in that space and trying to do all the right things, to realize that you can be close enough where you can arrive minutes earlier, make a difference. Had an AED in my car, at that point had probably 30 years of fire service experience. It was an interesting time for me to think about being so close and being surprised by my crew, being the fire chief in the community where that happened. I was actually uniformed in that restaurant. So really that was right then when I really started thinking about, all right, our crews are being dispatched to events. They're not seeing them. When we train people in CPR, we're telling them, look, if you witness an arrest, here's what you do. But we don't tell our firefighters that, they carry radios. We dispatch them to the events when they're, the ones that are the nearest get sent to that event. So that was the idea, could we use a cell phone, just like a firefighter's radio? Those cell phones were essentially radios. And could we, in CAD, we know where the event is. And this was a time where smartphones were just being able to know their location. And could we bring those pieces together? Could we take the event and look at people are nearby who are CPR trained, notify them? I mean, push notifications we take for granted today. That wasn't even on the original iPhones. It was, a few versions in before you could do push notifications. The phones knew where they were at, but could we remotely sense where they were at? There were some questions here if the technology that was close could actually bring these pieces together. So it was that event at lunch, and then it was sort of this technology journey. And I had a pretty strong technical background, and had a dispatch center. Didn't have mobile app developers, in the fire service. So this was going to be kind of something that I was going to have to figure out how to maybe make happen. But that was where the idea came from. And, could we bring this all together? So it was a pretty interesting time, as a fire chief to try to pull something like this off, just this sort of concept that seems like it could make a difference, but could we build such a thing? Was it possible then?
Well, along that journey, I mean, that's a big leap. And I knew you had a technical background and all that stuff, Chief, but were there ever times those first few years when you were trying to get it launched and there was some time that you were still the fire chief and you're also working on the app, right? You were doing those two things simultaneously for a little bit before you made the leap to retirement?
Yeah, I mean, this was a fire department project. This wasn't, a PulsePoint project or, my project. This became a department project where we said, hey, how could we build an app? How could we give this idea a shot? And we reached out to a number of people. We did how could we build an app, right? No app developers in the fire department. Had some IT guys, but no mobile app developers. So we ended up partnering with the university and bringing out a number of students, that were in app development program in Kentucky, Northern Kentucky University, brought them out on staff, put some staff around them, and then just sort of told the story. Here's what we see as possible, and spent about a year building it inside the fire department, and then the idea was we would test it inside our jurisdiction. So that was San Ramon Valley Fire. That had a population of about 170,000 people. So we were going to launch to 170,000 people, and we were going to see what happened. But it was, you think about like going to your council and saying, hey, I want to dispatch citizens to major cardiac emergencies. That was a pretty radical idea. And so they asked for a lot of things to sort of have some comfort in doing that. So that's kind of it was a long path and a lot of obstacles along the way. But after about a year, we actually ended up launching in the community and had some early successes. One of the very first activations of PulsePoint was at a Pete's Coffee and downtown on a weekend. And when our crews arrived, there was like 8 people there that had responded to the app, and 2 people doing CPR and multiple people clapping to 100 beats a minute and encouraging those rescuers. And it was like, wow, this maybe could work. And then when there was interest from other agencies and stuff, that's ultimately the fire department said, okay, we can't do this outside of our agency. This was only on iOS, it needed to be on Android. It was against one CAD. It would need to support multiple CADs. And then it went to the foundation, the university and the fire department, put its work, its IP, into the foundation, and board member, became one of the first foundation board members, one of the elected board members, still on the board today. And I kind of got it started as the fire chief and ultimately left the fire service after 33 years and ran the foundation.
So oddly enough,
we are like 4,500 agencies or something now.
So it really was the success of the app in San Ramon Valley that caused you to go, this is bigger than San Ramon Valley. Like we've got to spread the word and get the gospel out there.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions in the beginning. People are asking questions, what's going to happen? Are people going to download the app? Can you make this technology work? Are there negative effects? What's really going to happen here? And so it took some time to kind of figure out, what was going to happen, what wasn't going to happen, what was going to work and not work. And we really have been refining ever since. It's not the kind of thing you solve on a whiteboard. You get close and then you kind of figure it out as you go. And we are still iterating every version. It has a little bit more intelligence in it, a little bit more experience in it, a little closer to what we need to do. And really, at this point, it's not novel anymore. We really have, if you're near a cardiac arrest and PulsePoint's running in the dispatch center, we can notify you 100% of the time. That the technology is, nearly perfected in that sense. And that's why we're expanding into other things, to make sure that dispatchers know where the AEDs are, perfecting the AED registries, moving into residential areas, because PulsePoint originally only activated in public places. So it's like taking the technology that works and trying to augment it with AEDs and augment it with residential response and just sort of fill out the solution a bit with that basic technology.
So Rich, I gotta ask a question, because the way you're talking, you don't sound like a fire chief. I mean, I'd like to think that I'm this creative. So let's go back in the time machine. What were you like in high school? What made you
way back?
Yeah, let's go back. What was high school like for you?
Yeah, so in high school, I wanted to be a firefighter. That was I felt lucky being that young and knowing what I wanted to do. I actually graduated from high school 6 months early. I did half my final year. I sort of rallied to get my units and stuff so I could go straight into fire academy. So I graduated, a semester early, straight into fire academy, and I got hired. I was a full-time firefighter at 18 years old.
Was there somebody in the family that was in the fire service, or it was just?
Not in my family directly. Now there's several of us in the family, but I was the first, and there was friends, and I had some good experiences with the fire service coming across firefighters, and I think that was like one of the first things I remember about the fire service is walking home from school, and there was a crew doing something. I stopped and talked to them. I remember being fascinated by the pump panel. Like, how could anyone know how to run all that stuff? And just a friendly crew that spent time with me. And, I can't remember if I was by myself or with some buddies, but I remember having this great exchange with this crew that was out on the street, wasn't in the station. They were, doing hydrants or something. They were out on the street, and they were friendly and interacted with me. And I said, wow, what a cool job that is. And then later had other friends that were volunteers. There was a good volunteer program near me. I started as a volunteer, had a great early experience as a volunteer, and was fortunate enough to get hired early, to be a full-time guy at 18, and then just had a rich career, worked up through the ranks. I held a lot of different ranks, mostly operational stuff, but I was a captain, battalion chief for 18 years, a suppression line battalion chief for 18 years, and worked on a hazmat team. And I was, in a county, I was in San Mateo County, and then late in my career, the assistant chief job opened up for external recruitment in the town I lived in San Ramon Valley Fire. So after 27 years, I ended up getting hired as the assistant chief in San Ramon, and was the number 2 in my hometown. A couple years later, became the fire chief there. Being the fire chief in your hometown after a long career like that, that was really a really special way to end my career. And I always was very interested in technology. Always had technology as one of my responsibilities. So all the things that everybody's doing today, with back then it was PCs in the station was new, right? Stations didn't even have PCs, right? So putting PCs in station and doing, stuff with mobile, and always was the liaison to the dispatch center. And so I learned a lot about, the dispatch side of things. And then when I came to San Ramon, they had their own dispatch center for San Ramon Valley. And so I learned about CAD, I learned about mobile, and just had a general interest in technology. SunPro was a name that maybe, some of you guys know. So I was one of the owners of SunPro. I was a developer at SunPro and did a lot of the coding of that product. So that was a records product. And I did that, while I was in the fire service. And so I always had a sort of a strong technology bent. And then when PulsePoint comes along at sort of the end of my career in the fire service, to really know fire well after a 33-year career, but then to have a technology project, and it's like really my two loves, technology and fire service, two huge influences in my life, and to be doing that today, it's like one of the most creative times of my whole life. Really having an opportunity with a product. Like, to be creative, you have to have write a canvas, something to work on, to have an idea and be able to put it in motion. And with PulsePoint, really, if somebody has a good idea, 3 months later, it's in your guys' hands. And to be able to take ideas and take visions and put them into a product that, millions of people, have, see and use and comment on, it's really exciting.
I think it's fantastic how you've come so far, and it makes sense. You're the perfect pedigree for to take on a challenge like out of hospital cardiac arrest. So tell me a little bit about you were a liaison to the dispatch centers. That was common in your career, I think you said. The dispatchers and the dispatch centers. That's they're always kind of forgotten. It seems like in our organizations, they're not as at the forefront. At least that's a pretty broad brush comment, but what kinds of things do you see changing in dispatch centers that can help us make a difference and maybe marry PulsePoint and some of these AED registries to make sure dispatchers, play maybe a more integral role in making a difference here?
Yeah, for sure. The dispatchers play such a key role in cardiac arrest survival. The first thing that has to happen for a lot of these things to sort of start the ball rolling is the dispatchers have to recognize that a cardiac arrest is occurring. And we've gotten a lot better at that, right? The dispatchers using, EMD protocols, but having training that teaches, what a cardiac arrest sounds like and looks like and is described by. And I'm sure you guys have, listened to those phone calls that are cardiac arrests where, before, we were missing a lot of them. We were asking the wrong questions and we were taking too much time, and we're much smarter now in the dispatch centers. The dispatchers are much better trained, much better equipped to recognize that a cardiac arrest is occurring and put other things in motion. So that's the first thing I think, that our dispatchers are on sort of that front line of recognizing what the emergency is. You're also seeing, TCPR programs now. So as crazy as it was, the dispatchers would say, "Okay, crews are en route. Thanks for your call," and then nothing occurred until the crews arrived. Now dispatchers are getting directly involved. They're giving those CPR instructions over the phone, and that seems like, such an important step that if the dispatchers can get that caller to get CPR started, it can make such a big difference. Now we're taking that concept of telecommunicator CPR, TCPR, and introducing a concept called TAED, telecommunicator AED. And we are advocating, so PulsePoint's a 501c3 foundation, and we advocate for a number of things around cardiac arrest. But one of the things that we're really advocating for now is that dispatchers know the location of AEDs in the community during call processing. So typically today, a dispatcher will be following a protocol and they'll say, if there's an AED nearby, send someone for it. But that's kind of it, right? The dispatcher doesn't know where the AED is. The caller doesn't know where the AED is. That's not very effective. So what we're advocating is that the dispatchers in their workflow, in their protocols, they're not switching to some other screen or doing something different. But when they're going through, say, an EMD protocol where it says, are they breathing normally? Can you wake them? Is there an AED nearby? Instead of asking that question, they'll say, there's 3 nearby AEDs. Can you send someone to the pool area? There's an AED there, to the front desk to get that AED. So much more affirmative direction to the caller, and that the dispatchers know those locations. And we've seen in other countries that can make a huge difference. There's nuances to it, that they stay inside their protocols. They're not having to switch to other screens and things. There's not a large training component, but inside the protocols, the power phones, the priority dispatch pro QAs, the EMD protocols that they're in, that are integrated with the registry so that they can just do it in their normal workflow, and do it very, very efficiently, and not using other products or other screens or anything like that in the products that call takers are using. The tactical call taking softwares, the EMD softwares, those kinds of packages that are just have the ability to reach out and get the AEDs. And that, of course, takes knowing where the AEDs are located, building those registries, maintaining those registries. But what we find is if agencies are using them in 911, they have a totally different priority to those communities. And they'll work harder to make sure that they're, complete and accurate. So those are the 2 main things. There's lots of things that you can do to improve the quality of your AED registry, but nothing more important than the completeness, knowing where all those AEDs are and making sure that the information is accurate about those AEDs on their locations. And
when I'm bored at the airport, I pull up the AED app and I see if that AED that's on the wall is there, and if not, I load it.
Right.
And
it's harder and harder to find them that are missing, though.
It is.
That's that was always a big vacation thing with my family. Like in where we live, they're so good because we have good surveillance here. We don't miss too much here, and a lot of communities are like that. Where you have PulsePoint, the registries are quite good. But when you travel, it's like fresh territory. Where you can maybe find a few. It's been interesting for my family because spotting an AED is like a treasure. When we're out there, let's see if it's in there. Because it's kind of fun creating that record, seeing if you can get a great picture and put that pin exactly where it should be and give a nice description that somebody could use to find it. And I think that community facing tool to build the registry is important because you have to have people thinking about the location of AEDs, know what an AED is. This is another challenge of AEDs. People might know where they're at, but be afraid to use it. They've only seen it, on TV or something. So having the community part of the AED registry and understand its role in the community and its role in survival is another important component. It's not just your community building your registry, not just your staff building the registry, but the whole community being involved in building that registry and having a comfort level with it. So that's why we do a lot of a lot of marketing support for the agencies, outreach support, so that they have the tools to be able to engage their community around the registry.
And that part's free. I mean, so if a fire chief wants to have a more robust or start an AED registry, there's really no excuse not to go to PulsePoint and start to do that.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for saying that, Chief. So the foundation does provide every aspect of the registry at no cost. The registry itself, the integrations with all our partners, the marketing tools. We provide grants to agencies to help them do that marketing, training, support, the apps. Every aspect of the registry is provided at no cost. So any agency can do it. You just need a champion, to get out and start engaging your community, to build it, perfect it, make it available to your dispatchers. It's a no-cost way to make a big difference around cardiac arrest. I think we haven't talked about the Respond app. PulsePoint's kind of known for the Respond side of things. I think the registry side of things can make just as big a difference. If dispatchers know where AEDs are and are telling callers to go get the AED at particular locations, giving some basic AED skills to use that AED. They're very simple, but just somebody helping, just like CPR, it's simple, but having somebody coaching you while you're doing it. I think CPR is easier with an AED. Turn that AED on. It's like having a coach there with you. I'd rather do CPR, while that AED is on, kind of making sure I don't forget anything or the steps. Tell people, don't worry about an AED. It's going to make things easier for you. But having the dispatcher involved in that process, we think is key.
All right. So, Richard, you got a great team. We implemented, I should have looked it up, but I think we're like 5 years we implemented, and the team back then and throughout the whole time's awesome. So, how do you find managing technical people, creative people in a foundation setting? I mean, we're not in a fire department, paramilitary, and it's probably been a weird time even for you guys. So, how do you lead I'd like to think people who are good at developers are like charismatic, open book type people. Probably not. But how do you lead and manage these teams, and what are you finding success in?
One of the things that was a big difference for me when going from fire chief to running a foundation is, as a fire chief, you're managing paid employees, career employees, people who have been doing these jobs for a very long period of time, and they have benefits and pensions, and they're very tied to their careers, and they're very the relationships that they have with each other and the relationship with the fire service and the organization. It's very different than when you go to run a foundation where we are largely staffed with volunteers. So people who are working for the foundation have different types of motivations than a lot of times employees do. So a lot of our engineers are, they're writing finance software, payroll software. They're working at, Bay Area tech companies doing something in the tech world, but not saving lives. And the opportunity for them to volunteer their time for the foundation allows them to take their skills and, not work at the food bank or, pick fruit for, the urban farmer, or do other types of volunteer work that, a lot of the companies might be doing. They're taking their skills and they're working and volunteering for PulsePoint to try to make a difference in somebody's life and to try to save lives. And we make sure that we share the successes of PulsePoint and the mission and the advocacy work we're doing. And we encourage these very, very skilled engineers to take those skills and volunteer with us, as opposed to some of the other things they might do. We're not saying don't volunteer for the food bank, you know what I'm saying, but they're able to take these very unique skills that they have, which would be very expensive employees to hire. And, we do all our engineering work with volunteers and have for, 12 years now. Deep bench, people don't work for us every day a lot of times, but if we need a designer or we have a particular issue with the database, we bring in a database person, or we're working on security, we bring in security people. So this wide, broad bench of talent that might only come in and work for us for a couple of days on a particular thing. So we've got our core team that's with us every day, but a lot of times we're bringing in specialties as we need them in ways that we could never afford.
Richard, I gotta just ask this question because I guess I didn't realize how much do you have paid in volunteer? I didn't realize you had that much volunteer in this aspect.
Yeah, so our entire engineering team is volunteer. We have no paid developer engineering help. It's all volunteer. And it's how we can take a product like PulsePoint AED and our registry running, across the nation, Canada, other countries, and provide it for free. It's because we have dozens of people who are building and supporting that software as volunteers. So some paid staff, you got to pay lawyers and accountants and, lots of overhead and, ancillary personnel. Our management team is paid, but our entire engineering team, which is the majority of our staff, are volunteers.
Isn't that that's a cool model. I think that's one of the things I've always admired about PulsePoint is it really is people that care about the end goal. Mike and I visited with a couple of fire chiefs. We've talked a lot about the composition of your team. Do you see any recruitment and retention challenges, within your own, organization, that your own foundation there? I mean, have you seen some of the effects of, what's going on with fire chiefs, especially trying to recruit and retain firefighters? Has any of that impacted your world?
It really hasn't. Over the years, we have enough volunteers that, people have been on the team and left the team. But we have some that have been with us for the entire time.
Wow.
And some only come in when they have spare time or sometimes just need a mental break. They've been on a project for 6 months and they just want to, maybe, not work quite as hard or sometimes some of them work crazy hours in their full-time jobs. And so sometimes we just get them for a short period of time, but we have enough people rotating in and out that I think it just works for us. But as a manager, right, who was a fire chief and, or just, ran crews in a station or ran a battalion, it's different when you're running a nonprofit and you're running volunteers. They're interested in different things. They're motivated by different things. So it's been a big adjustment for me as a manager to sort of understand, the nuances of managing in this space. And just like all of us in different roles, you have to manage in different ways, but it's like a whole new thing for me, as a experienced manager in the fire service running a nonprofit. Some of that experience doesn't, translate. It's like you got to learn new skills. But we have a superstar team and they've accomplished, amazing things like creating things out of thin air, and there's nothing better than just like creating something that doesn't exist. It's very exciting. And, we just came off, we usually do a product roadmap meeting once a year that kind of sets us up for the next 12 months. And we just did a 12-month product roadmap. COVID kind of got us a little off track, but we just did our next 18 months of product planning. And that pipeline is full. It's just full of like amazing things that are coming. Just amazing things that are going to be coming your way.
Well, give us a little sneak peek. I mean, what you got? 2 PulsePoint fire.
Well, most of that, Chief, is like top secret. But no, I'll tell you
I was hoping he was gonna say he's fixing N first, but that's a whole.
If anybody could do it.
Well, I'll tell you the next thing we have released because we're queuing it up right now to go out the door. So we have quite a process to get a product from idea to out the door. That's about a 3-month cycle for us. So we have a bunch of like our good ideas, what we would say our top ideas. they're all vetted and kind of queued up to go. And once we ship a product, release a product, then there's a meeting to decide, okay, what's next up. So we take that, and that gets worked for about 3 months before it's out the door. So we're just about ready to release on the Respond side, version 4.15, and it has in it some stuff for wildland season, right? So PulsePoint does a lot of alerting around local emergencies and giving heads up to the community and creating community awareness, and wildfire is a big one. So this release has a merged incident feed in it. So today, you look at, you're looking at LA City fire, or you're looking at Washington, D.C. fire, or you're looking at Seattle fire. You're looking at one agency at a time. You can follow multiple agencies, but you switch between them. So in this latest release that's coming out, you can put agencies together. So sometimes you're in maybe a county, like where I am. San Ramon Valley is where I live, but Contra Costa fire is close, and Alameda County fire is close, and live more Pleasanton is kind of the area that I work and visit and live in. So I can add those all to a single feed now, and look at them all together and not have to switch between them. And this is important for like wildland awareness, where you're getting alerts for things that are happening, maybe not right in the city you're in, but the jurisdictions next door, the agency next door, and being able to see those in a consolidated fashion. So it's kind of a simple way of explaining it, but this merged feed is something that has been asked for quite some time. And that'll be shipping here soon. So one of the last things we do with the apps are we translate them, to other languages. They get all their testing, and then they go out the door. So I would think, within the next week or so, we'll be shipping that. And that's going to be a popular feature.
That will be cool. We've had a lot of discussions, even just in the metropolitan area I work, about how do area fire departments kind of keep some awareness of what we're all doing. We had a tornado hit recently that kind of crossed through a few jurisdictions, and there's not really any good product that allows you to have that cross site. And it's kind of, once again, PulsePoint filling a void that I guess had nothing to do with the original aim, but is certainly a
right.
big
As
impact
you have
for emergency responders and the public. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, you could set up a feed that says, hey, these are my mutual aid agencies. So maybe you look at your own agency day to day, but something larger happens like that, you can switch the feed to your mutual aid agencies and see you and the surrounding area, for particular events or particular needs. Like wildland is one of the main reasons why that was created. But as we have more coverage, in some states we have 100% coverage, and in large states like California, we're over 80% coverage. So being able to look at your jurisdiction, but everything around, the entire Bay Area kind of thing is valuable in larger scale events.
All right, so let's back up just in case somebody's made it this far and is like, this PulsePoint thing, I don't know how you guys did it, because it seems to me I'm answering multiple questions, the same questions all the time. So people ask, well, why should we do this? And I bring up, obviously, what its true intent was, the CPR, the AED, location, alerting. But Tom, I think you were talking this PR aspect. I can't tell you how many citizens are advocating for PulsePoint that say, if you want to know where the fire trucks are going, you got to get PulsePoint on your phone, and they can choose how their phone alerts them. Like mine's turned on just to get structure fires, and we'll talk about the fire side in a second. But Tom, aren't you seeing like how much the public loves this thing they're like, I didn't know you guys were so busy, and that's not even all our calls.
I consider Chief Price a pretty good friend. Man, the myth, and legend. So when I say this, it's 100% genuine, though. It's arguably one of the most fantastic things I've done as fire chief. And it was kind of an accident. I just Forrest Gump my way into it. But truth be told, it's all those things you said. It's the community interaction and transparency. I mean, people, if people want to know what their tax dollars are doing, well, we'll show them. They can listen to our audio. Not every department wants to do that, but I couldn't construct a real valid reason not to. I think it's great for them to be able to see what we're doing, and if you can see on social media, people will, somebody post on a neighborhood Facebook page and says, hey, what were all the sirens? Or I heard a boom. People will answer by screenshotting PulsePoint into that message stream. And so I think you do it for that, but then it's not just that. It's also our own firefighters, that because that stream is into CAD, it is so reliable. You'll hear these phones go off right before the alerts hit. And so you just have so many benefits of being a PulsePoint community, but it still ties into that number one thing, that in the most time-sensitive, life-threatening emergencies that we will encounter as firefighters, which are cardiac arrests, it's an app that'll make a difference. And now it's even, we've set it up here. I don't know if you're doing it, Mike, for residential settings. Our off-duty firefighters now are notified if they choose to do so. They're notified of cardiac arrest in a residential setting with the verified responder program in PulsePoint. Are you doing that in Michigan?
We are working on it as we speak. My PulsePoint guy is working with some hospitals. Huh?
I said no pressure with Richard Price here with it.
I think we had one of the biggest issues we had is people didn't want any of that to go out, right? And we had to do a bunch of hurdles and discussions like, folks, you can get this free on an app if you sat there with a scanner app and hear the address we're going to, what the call type is, and we're filtering it to some less than that. And so I think, like so many fire chiefs, Oakland County next to us, we were so close into getting them on board, and just legal got the minutia and slowed it down. And so I think that's where we just try to keep talking to fire chiefs. There's an operational value, there's a marketing value, there's a community aspect, but most importantly, when we do CPR class, we say, hey, here's the PulsePoint. We put the banner up in the front of the class, right? Here's CPR class, scan this, get PulsePoint, and then we walk them through it. So it's almost like they feel like, here's the best example I have. We used to just hand out smoke alarms, right? And we gave them, if you came up to our station, we gave you smoke alarms. Now we go to your house and put them in, and we do a safety check. It's almost like completing this thing. We were teaching people about fire safety and then expecting them to implement it. Well, now we're doing the same. We're teaching them on full arrest and CPR and how to use an AED. And now we're giving them a tool to actually get activated when it's within close proximity. And I think it just ties together so well. All right. So
if you think about that partnership, we need the citizens. We've always known we need them on cardiac arrest. That's why we've taught CPR. That's why we placed AEDs, because we know, we have travel time. We've got to get them involved. So this partnership of saying, we're going to dispatch you like we dispatch our own firefighters. We're going to dispatch you if you're nearby, because we need you to do that. We need you to start that process. That's a pretty unique partnership, right? We really don't do that in other ways. So the citizens sort of sense like, I'm part of a system. I'm part of something bigger. I'm actually going to get dispatched if I'm near this event, if I'm on the floor above, if I'm in the business next door. That's a pretty special partnership with the community. I mean, we try to do it with CERT, we try to do it with other programs, but then, it's like the follow-up on that is hard. You have to have things for them to do. You got to get them involved in different ways. So, when you're trying to build a relationship with your community, and I think it's unique to the fire service, the police departments right now, they're seeing the need for that, but it's tough for them. Radios are getting encrypted, things are more secure. There's less opportunities to sort of have partnerships in real ways with the community, where the fire service kind of going the other way. They have ways to partner. They have ways to reach out. PulsePoint's a very unique way, to build that relationship. And you're notifying them to other events that they care about. It's not just CPR, which is could be a once in a lifetime event for somebody, but they're stuck in traffic, or they smell smoke, or it's one of the magic pieces of PulsePoint is that it goes beyond just CPR, which is hard to keep people engaged on because it is so infrequent. But traffic collisions are happening every day, and crews are responding to lots of different things. Power's out, they can see that there's a power emergency, or there's like so many ways that we can engage the public and then build that CPR network, but also engage with them and introduce them to us and keep them engaged with us. It's very unique in that regard.
It certainly works. It's we're finally seeing some cities around us that are they have that Pied Piper syndrome where they've been watching our PulsePoint enough that they're joining. And I can only think that's not unique, that it sometimes takes some seeds to get planted in certain geographic regions and then it grows. And so I'm curious, are you seeing that? You seeing that some in Michigan, Mike, that other agencies are starting to inch that way?
I was at a Chiefs conference last week, and this discussion came up with 3 separate fire chiefs. I said we should have all had you together because, they want to know. I think they're in. Their dispatch centers are in, and they're just trying to seek to understand. And what I said to almost all of them: pick up the phone, call the PulsePoint team. They've been through this. I guarantee you, with more attorneys, more lawyers, more CAD systems, and then you start talking about all these other benefits, and they're like, all right, I'm calling. And so last week I had to get my daughter to register for her first year of college. You with me? And I said, you got to pick up the phone and call the admissions office. We can't answer this question online. And so it was the same I felt to these fire chiefs: pick up the phone, call them, and have this robust conversation, because the team is awesome. And that's no joke.
I appreciate that,
They
Chief.
answered everything.
Yeah, and people can start slow and move into the professional version. Get AEDs in their dispatch center. All that stuff comes over time. You don't have to do everything right away. You start with showing the public a limited set of calls. If you get comfortable, you can increase that. The more activity you show, the more engaging it is. You can add the professional piece, for your crews. That's really for on duty use, or it removes the restrictions, right? So it does give you residential activation because it removes all the restrictions. You see all the calls, you see all the addresses, you see all the cardiac arrests. So I think people get stuck on, it's for residential activation. It's not. It just removes all the restrictions. So you kind of get that by default. But there's you can take your time and move through the steps of PulsePoint. It's it's the ones that have been around for a long time that have kind of done all those things, but it's overwhelming when you look at everything all at once. But you just take a step in the right direction to get started.
So Rich, you talked about basically this interoperability concept. We talked about wildland. We talked about the AED in the dispatch center. Outside of PulsePoint, what's next for you?
Boy, I don't see an outside of PulsePoint for me right now. I mean, I really see PulsePoint doing some things you don't expect. There are some very, very exciting developments, and I think there's a lot more coming, and there's a lot more excitement in the pipeline. And for me, I'm telling you, it's a very creative time. It's a very exciting time. And I think we have the team and the environment to make some huge differences in people's lives, and the fire service being at the forefront of that. I'm not going anywhere for a while.
Well, that's a good thing. I wanted to, as we kind of wrap up here, I wanted to ask you kind of for some advice. Monday, I had another department in the state reach out, and they want to do a little Zoom call and talk about PulsePoint and try to learn. Mike had just shared he had some colleagues at a conference. That's very common, right? People all the time they kind of know some of the folks who are disciples of the good that your foundation does and PulsePoint does as an app. If we have fire chiefs and emergency response leaders that'll watch us talk, if you had some advice to them, if they were leading organizations that they're not PulsePoint communities right now, maybe they're apprehensive, maybe they're making excuses as to why they can't get through some hurdles, what would you tell them? What would your advice be to some of those communities that maybe need some momentum?
Well, I think probably the most common reason we hear to not implement PulsePoint is priorities. I think when people understand what it is, they see the value, they want it, they're getting, they might be getting pushed from, their staff or from their community members, their elected officials, but they've got, a CAD upgrade or radio project, or, they just got other things. And it's just getting it into the priority. PulsePoint takes, it's not really usually one person making that decision. You've got the dispatch center involved, and you've got maybe elected officials involved. There's, it's getting all the stakeholders lined up, and getting all their questions answered at once to just kind of move it forward. Medical directors sometimes involved. It's because it takes multiple stakeholders. It can seem like it takes a lot to get a decision to go forward. And I would say just like engage us, let me be with, your stakeholders and just answer all their questions, and give them references to, if the questions are from the medical director, we'll introduce them to other medical directors. If it's from maybe the dispatch center, we'll give them a similar dispatch environment using the same CAD systems or the same call taker softwares or things, and just introduce them to others that are using it. We have, every kind of agency now, from the largest in the country to, one station departments, regional dispatch centers. Just give us the opportunity to answer the questions, and make sure that they're getting accurate information, that they're not, making some assumptions that may not be accurate. Just reach out to us. Let us have the chance to answer those questions.
Sometimes I hear money come up as an issue too, and I keep telling people, Rich, I think you talked about building on it in the future. Like, I think it's pretty inexpensive, but check with your local hospitals. Like you were talking earlier about how you were trying to reach out and build these coalitions as a fire chief, but pre-early PulsePoint. I would say the same goes. Our PulsePoint main person here in our organization, who does our CPR programming and all that, he's involved at our local hospitals, and they're working, right, to reduce the impact of cardiac arrest in our communities, just more so than probably we are. And what a resource they are. They're helping push some of my other peer organizations to get into PulsePoint, because they'll help write that check too. So as you see barriers, right, reach out. Tom, I don't know if you're seeing the price, but I hear exactly what Rich was saying. I hear price. Do you hear anything else why chiefs aren't doing it?
I think both. I think the top reason I see is that people lack an advocate internally to get interested in it, and it just is always, it blows my mind. We walked into it. It's a similar story to Rich. I was up at the Resuscitation Academy in 2010. I'd been the fire chief for 1 year. Our Utstein survival rates sucked, and we were trying to do things different. And around that same time, right, that would be about a parallel time, wouldn't it, Rich, to when PulsePoint starting to come out of San Ramon Valley, 2010, 2011-ish.
Yeah.
And I remember reading it. It was just a very subtle note in some trade journal. And so I got interested in it, and I got passionate about it. And I remember being astounded at how cheap it was. Now, it's not inexpensive, right? It's a very technical piece of technology and interops with all these things. But compared to all the other technology solutions I buy as a fire chief, it is competitively priced for sure. But it's still the advocacy, I think, that misses in some departments.
Yeah. I mean, we do have a lot of sponsors, hospital systems pay for PulsePoint many times. We're seeing now in wildfire areas, utilities getting interested in sponsoring PulsePoint to help with, mass communications. We've had Wireless Foundation. We've had tech companies. We've had if cost is an issue, definitely talk to us about that. We give grants ourselves sometimes. I don't find myself that cost is usually the hurdle. It's usually priority. Getting it to the top of the stack. Dispatch centers always are busy, always have a lot going on, and that's an integration point for us. And we're having to install into these very expensive systems. These dispatch systems provide 24/7 support on those interfaces. It's a very technical and complex integration that has to happen, to have real-time communications with that dispatch center. And the other thing we're trying to do is to add more value in other places. So your investment in PulsePoint, gets you your AED registry, gets AEDs in front of the dispatchers. And we're also doing these third-party integrations in a lot of communities to do other things. There's finding that, being able to use, I'll just give you one example that we're doing in a number of communities now. They're doing traffic preemption, using their network, say for their buses. So the buses drive around. When the buses get close to the traffic signals, they turn them green. But when it's a fire truck, they only want to turn them green if that truck's en route to a call. So they're using a PulsePoint interface on their unit statuses so they can use traffic preemption for their truck. So like things like that, we're doing a number of these third-party integrations at the request of the agencies that adds more value for that initial investment. So that's another way to look at it, is when they see some of those types of things, doing FAA flight restrictions over wildland fires, integrations with the Western Fire Chiefs on some of the wildfire initiatives they're doing, interfacing with the utilities, around wildfire events. There's a lot of third-party use of that data potentially, because PulsePoint has a normalized data set that's consistent across the country. It opens up opportunities for other things that the cities may want to do.
That's amazing. That's cool stuff.
Rich, if they want more info, where do they go?
Well, I think, PulsePoint.org is a good place to start. They can always send me a note. I'd be happy to talk to any fire chief that, is watching this show. My email is richard.price@pulsepoint.org. Definitely reach out to me personally. I'll put you in the right contact, the right members of our team. Follow us on social, at PulsePoint on Twitter and PulsePoint on Facebook. But, all the latest stuff is usually on social for us, but never hesitate just to reach out with me, have a conversation, talk to me about any challenges that you might be having. We'll find ways to make it work.
Well, Rich, I can't say thanks enough. It takes people with some pretty creative minds sometimes to change our industry. And there's no doubt that your efforts, your team's efforts are saving lives. And I can't say thank you enough, because I'm excited hearing just some of these things. And I even learned a couple more peer pressure tactics on interoperability and some of the others. So thank you so much from myself, my team. You're making our response faster. You're making our community safer. So thanks. And I hope everybody likes and subscribes to the event. We'll put all of Rich's contact information for Tom and I. Thank you, everybody, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it very much.